Hi, this is Nancy, and I'm going to be showing you today how to make one of my velvet books. I've gotten a lot of requests, so I thought I'd show you from start to finish how I made it. First thing I did was I took this LaBlanche mold and I poured it with resin, the 10-minute casting resin. And as soon as it was hardened, but still flexible, I took it out, and if you see, it doesn't fit right in here, and that's because I stretched it out. So you could do this with clay and manually just open it up a little bit. What I did with the resin is I took a container that I just searched around till I found the shape and size that I wanted, and it has moved a little bit, but what I did was I fit it around the bottom of the container and let it harden completely there. So I set it down flat with this in the center and let it harden, and that way it stretched it out and it made it more of a round shape. And this was just because I wanted it to be a little bit wider for the image that I chose. Now the only other thing that I did to prepare was I took an old book, and I buy these at thrift shops or libraries when they have sales. They're 10 cents, 25 cents a piece. I like to look for vintage books, but you certainly don't have to. You could just buy whatever kind of book you'd like. And so I gave it a coat of red paint, and the center I painted white because if it was red, it would sort of muddy the look of this image. I want the image to stand out as much as possible, so I typically paint white or a light color underneath my rice paper, and that makes the image stand out more. So that's the only other thing I've done to prepare. I'm going to show you all the other steps. So first thing I want to do is cut out my image. This is ITD collection rice paper. And you can find all of these products in my listing. If you open it up, you will see my link. I have an affiliate link for the LaBlanche molds, for most of the products that I'm using, this rice paper, it's all there. So what I do is I'm going to take a water pen, or you could just take a brush dipped in clean water, and I want to trace around this image that I'm going to use. So that's about where I'd like it. And I'm just going to use water around the outside. And I'm just going to go tear it. And then I'll just keep putting my frame over it to see if I need to keep making it smaller. Okay, so we don't want the paper sticking out, so I'm going to cut a little bit more away, or tear it actually. Okay, I got the edges all torn off, and I just want to warn you, be very careful when it's wet. Boy, I went really close right here, but it's going to turn out okay. Just to the edge. I cut it awfully close there. So I'm going to decoupage the image, and the one thing you want to do is just pull all your edges to make sure they're flat. They're not all crumpled up. It just lays nicer that way. I'm using Pentart matte varnish. You can use whatever you like. And since I already have this where I want, I'm just leaving it right here, and I'm going to lift it. A little too much. It's okay if you go outside the lines. When we do the velvet, you won't see this. We're going to be using a glue, and you won't see, this is, even though it's matte, it does leave a little bit of a sheen behind, but you won't be seeing that. And then I just press it down with my brush, lift up my other side, and do this end. and I'm going to leave that to dry. And what I'm going to use is Pentart Primer Paste Gesso, black gesso. And it's just a primer, but you could just go right to a black primer if you'd like. You don't have to use a gesso. This is just thicker, seems to be like more matte. Next. So I'm just going to continue to paint this and make sure to get in all of the little holes in this frame. And next we're going to be using Pentart Liquid Metal in gold. And this is just, it's a solvent-based product, and it has to be stirred thoroughly because the pigments do separate. So I already shook it. You can hear the little ball inside shaking around. But then I like to come and make sure there's nothing settling on the bottom. And I don't know if you can see that, but there's still, even after I shook it for a while, there's still some of the pigments down there. So you want to make sure you mix it real well. And it's good to go, and there's nothing on here. So this looks good. I'm just going to dip this in, wipe some off, and then just lightly go over the frame. Now I'm going to come back and do more, but you don't want to do too much at a time. You don't want to gop it on, if that's a word, gop. So I'm just going to lightly dry brush. And this just takes a little while to dry, so I'll set it down. But I think I like that amount of gold. Really just to peek through, a little bit of the black showing through, sort of make it look vintage. That's the look I'm going for with this first. Because it's a solvent-based product, you can't clean it with water, your brush. You have to clean it with a solvent like turpentine. So this is from Pentart also, and I just take my dirty brush and pounce it in there, wipe off the excess, and do that 2 or 3 times. And then I'll take Dawn soap and put some Dawn soap just in my hand here and rub the brush in there a couple times. And then that'll take this turpentine smell away. While that is drying, I'm going to make the spine, the mold for the spine. And for that, I'm going to use air dry clay. I keep it wrapped in this plastic. I use Jovi. What I do first is I brush a little bit of cornstarch into the mold to keep it from sticking. And you can just shake excess out. And then I just pull off pieces of my clay. I'm finding that if I store it in the plastic that it came in, it's staying a little bit more wet in there, which is what I like. Sometimes I take it out of this and just store it in the plastic, and I do use an awful lot of it, so rarely does it get hard for me. But if you don't use that much, you can keep it in this, wrap it in plastic, and you can also store it. You could store it in the refrigerator, and it'll keep it nice. And then I just take a long blade palette knife and come and scrape off the top. And then if I took too much anywhere, I can come back and push it in. So this is ready to go. I just turn it upside down and let gravity help it come out. And I just lightly help pull it out. And there we go. So since my work is more vintage feel to it, if it cracks a little bit in places, I'm okay with that. I use Express glue or hobby glue. All right, right, so I'll just take this off again. I lay it in my hand and then use a brush to put on the glue. And I make sure to get it on all the edges because you're going to want to press them down so they don't pop up. So just get the whole thing. And just form it how you'd like it on there. So this will dry clear, and as I said, you want to get that glue right on the edges. What I like to do is just turn the book like this, and I can see where it's sticking up, and then I just press it down. I painted the mold red while this is still drying, and then I prepared this mold with clay in it and put it in the freezer. And even though it's a flat mold, this one is a little bit more, it's a little bit difficult to get out. So I'm just going to release the edges first and hold it down. And we just had a little tiny crack there, but I can fix that. This is a LaBlanche Mould, and I'm going to put this on the back of the book, but I have to wait till it defrosts a little bit. If I put the glue on it right away, the glue will freeze, and obviously then it won't stick. So I'm just going to let this defrost a bit and then adhere it to the back, and then after it dries, I'll paint it black and add the gold just like I did to the frame on the front. To apply the velvet powder, first you're going to need a glue. I like to use the Pentart Tacky glue. And the reason is because it goes on so thin that when you apply your velvet powder, there won't be any bumps on it. You can use hobby glue. You can use any kind of glue you want. There are metal leaf glues that are fine. The only difference between this and a regular metal leaf glue is you need less of this, and also this dries really quickly. So, not that it dries quickly, but it's prepared. It's ready to use faster than a normal metal leaf glue. I've used some that take up to 30 minutes. This one, by the time I'm finished applying it to the whole book, it'll be ready to use. So you can see how little I'm using here. I'm just going to apply it very thin. You want to make sure not to miss any spots because it is a little hard to come back to fill in spots that you've missed, because the velvet powder it's textured, it's actual like fibers. It's hard to get glue into a spot that you've missed. So just make sure to go both ways with your brush. I'm using a very soft, bristled, dry brush. And I'm just going right up to the decoupaged image. So now I'm not going to mess with this up here. I'm going to just let this dry. You know it's ready when it turns clear. So you won't see any more white, and then it's ready. It stays very sticky, and you'll want to put your brush right into water to get it cleaned off, or it could ruin your brush. So I'm going right up to it, making sure to go both ways and get the corners really well. Okay, you can see it's almost dry already. I just put my brush in the water. I'm not sure if I said why I paint the book red first. So whatever it is I'm doing, whatever project, whatever color velvet powder I'm using, I'll paint that object, if possible, the color of the velvet powder. Just so if I do apply it a little too thin in some area, or I didn't apply the glue properly, then at least the book is red and you really won't notice as much. The velvet powder does come in 2 sizes, and it does go a very long way. Someone asked me when they first saw my book, how many containers of this did it take? And I said, this only took maybe I don't even think it took a quarter of the amount of velvet powder that came in the small container. And the other thing you want to do is work on plastic, so when you're wiping off the excess, you can pour it right back into the container. This size does come with a little pointy cap. You can actually like squeeze it out, but it's just easier to take off the cap, and then we're ready to put it on. I'm just going to apply this using a lot more than I need, because it's just going to go back onto the plastic and we'll put it back into the container. And after I get this on a nice size area, you just have to press it down firmly. And I'm just going to start pressing it down. I just use my fingers. You can use a brush, but you do want to press it pretty hard. So I just think fingers are going to work better. And I put it all the way into that crease. And we'll just add some more down here. Okay, so I do believe I've pressed it down everywhere. And to shake off the excess, I'm just going to stand it up. And that's it. So I'm going to gather this up and pour it back in the container. And it looks like it's about I only used about this much for that whole book. So I should have painted these little pieces back when I was doing the frame. But I just buy these from Amazon, and I think they're just called book corners. And they're just little lace detailed, they're metal corners. So I just have to run this over the top lightly to make them stand out against the red velvet. They look so pretty. To apply the frame and the corner pieces, I use Pentart Heavy Body Gel, which is a very thick glue. And I apply it with a palette knife, and you just need a little bit on the corner pieces. And I just try to apply it to the point and the ends there. And if you get too much, you can just come back with a paintbrush and remove it. But you don't need a lot. This is an incredibly strong glue, and it's also nice if your whatever it is that you're trying to glue isn't flat. Because it's so thick, it can sit. So if you can see how it squishes through a little bit, then I'll just come back with a brush and remove some. And this is the glossy Heavy Body Gel, and it will dry clear. And I don't think I said it before, but you do not want to seal the velvet powder. That would mess up the look of it. So it does not have to be sealed. Okay, the 4 corners are on, and I'll just do the same thing now with the mold, with the heavy body gel, and I'm just going to apply it the whole way around into the center. And see what I meant before about it's not flat. There is like a little divot in there, and this will just fill the whole thing up because it's so thick. This is a great product to use for mixed media. So I just line that up, press it down, and if any oozes out the edges, I can just grab it with my little paintbrush. Isn't that amazing already? That is so pretty. Now I'll come back, and I didn't really seal the image with anything. I think I'm going to do a little bit of a shiny product. This is called pouring glaze, and you can pour it on things, but you can also just apply it with a brush. So I'm just going to use a soft brush, and you always want to do 2 coats with this. The first coat goes on nicely, but when you put that second coat on, you really see a difference, and it dries almost like glass is on top. You just want to get a nice even coat, and you want to make sure you're drying on a flat surface, because if it tilts, it could slide down, and then it'll be thicker on one side than the other. And I just push it all the way into the edges, and then I'll come back and do one more coat, and you'll see how nice and glossy the finish is. I'm just putting the liquid gold on the back of the book, on the mold, and I'm putting this pretty heavy. I just want to see a little peak of black through the gold. And I'll probably come back and do a little bit extra on some spots to make it a little bit heavier. Okay, I touched up all the red around here because it was a little messy, and I finished with the gold. I added gold to the mold, and here is the front. I did a second coat of the pouring glaze, and it came out really nice. It's nice shiny finish to the book, and the only thing left is 2 things. I typically add a dark wax and then a gold wax onto the edges of the pages, and I use Pentart gold wax, and for this I usually use a brush, and I use this for all of my waxing. I don't like to mix my brushes for wax and paint. And then I just dip it in, and I squeeze the book closed and just brush it on. Since this is already tanned, the pages, I can put the gold wax right on it, but if it was a new book with bright white pages, I would use some kind of medium first to darken it. So you could use the antique paste in umber first. You could just paint it brown. You could do any kind of dark treatment to it, and then put the gold wax over that. Otherwise, the gold wax over white pages, it just doesn't look aged. So there you have a little bit of a gold sheen. I added it to all 3 of the sides. And the last thing to do is add a ribbon to tie it closed. So I just cut a length. This is just a satin. I think it goes nicely with the velvet. And I use Express glue And what I do is I open up the first page and I put the glue on both sides of the ribbon. And lay it in there. About a third of the way down you could do it in the middle, but I think it looks pretty up high with the, after you tighten a bow with the pieces laying down, falling down. And then do the same thing to the other side and put it right across from it. And then I usually let that set for a little bit. I'll put something heavy on it to weigh it down. And I cut the ribbon. Okay, and then I just tie it in a bow. And you could cut those as short as you want, but there it is. Velvet covered book. I've done one in blue, the burgundy, and this is my second one in red. Absolutely beautiful. Makes a gorgeous gift. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. Drop them below, and also make sure to check out in my description, I have a link for almost all of the products I've used today. Thanks for watching.